We're going to do a Sentinel exhaust brake system install on a Detroit DD5 Thomas bus. You're going to take down this downpipe. It can be a little stiff. I did break the lower clamps and had to get new ones. I was able to use the upper clamps. And so FYI, you might have a couple clamps on hand, but just work itself out of there. It'd be a little stiff. It's nice though that you can pull the entire downpipe off and take it in the shop and do what you got to do to it, and then come and install it back on. So just yank it off here and take it to the shop. Now, of course, you're going to take the heat shield off. Just big hose clamps, really. You're going to take these clamps off. You have to cut them, and then you'll use hose clamps. Peel the heat shielding off here, the loom. Takes a little bit, and it has this tinfoil type insulation on the inside. Now, what I'm doing here is very important. I draw an outline of the existing downpipe. That way, when I go to put it together and weld it, I can match it perfectly to that outline. That's very important. And if you wanted, you could do like a jig where you weld tabs on your table if you're doing it often. Now I'm going to peel away this insulation. You know, this is something you're not going to use again. You're going to cut this out. So just peel it away, get rid of it, and mark your brake. It's always good to double check to make sure you're marking it right. Make sure your length and it's going to, you know, go in good. And they do slide inside the brake. The brake is an OD or ID, and it'll slide right over your existing downpipe. So we're just using a grinder with a cutting blade to cut it. Make sure you got good protection, good eye protection. But it cuts pretty easy. Now, on this installation video, I didn't want to go too fast, but also didn't want to insult your intelligence, so be patient here. Some people will be very familiar with this type of stuff, others won't. But this is how I did it, and it worked well, and it was quick. Now, see, I'm trying to make sure that it's within the lines of my outline there that I drew on my table. You can't really see it, but I've got a good outline, and it's extremely important that you get this exactly the length and the angles, or it will not go on the down or back on the bus very well. You don't want to have to come back and redo this. So I'm just tacking it here, making sure everything's cleaned up good. I got to cut this back a little bit. I was a little too close, so cleaning that up. And then I go to tacking all the way around. I did this because the brake was a little bit bigger, and so let's just tap it around so I get a nice weld. Knock it down, clean it up, and then go to welding. Weld it all the way around nice. I'm not going to tell you how to weld. I'm an average welder, decent welder. Some of you may be very good welders, others may not, but you obviously want a good weld on this, especially on the front side, or it will leak. And of course on the back side too, because you're talking about a bus, so you do not want any exhaust leaks on this. Weld it up. Once I weld it up, I'll clean it up a little bit, and then I'll spray it with zinc, with a zinc coating. Now, you know, you don't have to do that, but it keeps it from rusting, and it's heat proof, so it's not going to melt or anything. You could probably use some high temp paint here, but zinc is just, you know, it's a galvanized coating. It's not going to rust. So then I'm going to cut my heat shield here, because obviously it's not going to go over the brake. I'm going to cut it on both sides, just measuring it by looks, sliding it over. And I'm going to use my hose clamps. Obviously I have to have 2 more extra big ones. I use my hose clamps to tighten it down and to make it all, well, I guess the back side here you use your shield clamps, so that works pretty good. And you notice I pointed the brake to the front of the bus, and I think that's the best because of just the way it fits in there and the way the electronics will go, the wiring. So, all right, I'm going to tighten these clamps up, and pretty much done with the actual brake actuator install. You've got your heat shields, protection. Now it's going to go back in, and this went in. It took me a little bit. It was a little hard to get it pushed up in there. I had to jiggle it in there, but eventually got it in there. You'll see it's pointed towards the front of the bus. This video is kind of, might get you backwards, but you see the wires all secured in there. The brake is pointed towards the front of the bus. Now the wiring, I fed it up through, zip tied it, made sure the jumper wire was nice and clean and not going to rub on anything, chafe on anything, or get heat. And I brought it inside the cab through one of the little rubber ports there. Now, just taking off the dash, I'm going to drill my hole while I've got it here. It's a 3/4 inch hole for your switch, the dash switch. This took a little bit of work, but it wasn't hard work. It was just, getting everything off and installing everything, and I'll talk about where to install it and how to install it here in just a little bit. Take that cover off. Take the instrument plate here off. Of course, you have to unscrew the ignition switch and the air brake valve. Install the dash switch. Make sure you get it nice and snug in the back. I usually put a wrench on it, tighten it up nice and snug, but not too much. So I want to get you familiar with the controller you'll be getting. It's a BM1001. It's going to have a black wire that's going to go to ground, just a chassis ground. Make sure it's a solid ground. Then your red wire is going to be key on power. It's going to be fused, but you need to get a good key on power. Then your connector here, it's a small connector. It'll connect to your jumper wire going down to your brake. And we keep this connector because it's easy to go through firewalls. It's easy to route, but it does have some negatives. It comes apart. So we put some shrink tubing in there that you can slip over the connector, shrink it down, and that keeps it together and also keeps it dry. So, and then of course, we've got the green wire here, and the green wire goes to your accelerator pedal. And I'll show you how this thing, the controller, is connected here. So you'll see for the ground, I found a ground that goes to your controllers, and I just spliced it in with a butt connector. Worked really well. Then your key on power, I went to your ignition switch, and there just put a spade connector on it and connected it just like this to your ignition switch. Then the green wire goes down to your accelerator pedal, disconnected, and it goes to the number 1 connector on the Detroit. Number 1, the closest to the driver. And you just splice it right into it. It's best to solder it if you know how. And then you, of course, wrap it with good harness tape and secure it. And that's how it works. Once it's all together, then, of course, just put your dash back together, dash panel, screw it all back together, and put your knobs back on and your ignition switch and all of that. You guys have done this many times. Put your bezel on. This is not a big deal. It just takes a little time to do. Something you guys have done many times. Then you're going to label it, make sure the driver knows what it is, and we'll use it. And then you're going to want to do your testing and I guess put those final screws in and then do some testing here. And you could do it with the key on, and you push the dash switch, it'll illuminate, and then you push the pedal and you'll hear the brake open and close with just the key on. And then of course you want to do it with the engine on as well. You turn the engine on and turn the brake on, let off the throttle, and you'll hear the rushing noise, and then push the throttle and you hear it go away. Now, if you have questions, you can go to bundymotors.us, go to support and installation instructions, and you will see all the instructions you need to install this brake, including the instructions for the controller, the BM1001. And that's it. That's the final instructions. So thank you for listening. Again, this is Sentinel Exhaust Brake System by Bundy Motors.